Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I would like to welcome you to College Conversations about BSMD Programs on behalf of Sage Scholars and our founder, Dr. James Johnston. My name is Jenny Johnson, and I am the Consulting Director of School Counseling and Student Engagement. This program is brought to you by Ready Set College, a product of Sage Scholars. Ready Set College is a college search engine matching careers, including assessments and majors to appropriate colleges. It is also dedicated to providing information on college funding and has a library of useful articles and takeaways, including the recordings from this series, such as our webinars that we've already done on liberal arts colleges, STEM programs, art programs, and students with learning disabilities, and then of course today's program on the BSMD program. Today's presenters represent some of our premier colleges that are members of the Sage Scholars Consortium of Colleges. Today we have RPI, Rensselaer Polytechnical Institute, and Washington and Jefferson College. Before we get started, I just want to do a little housekeeping. All participants will remain on mute during the presentation. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat box. There will be time for Q&A at the end of the presentation. This program is being recorded, as I just mentioned, and will be sent to you afterwards. It'll probably be next week when we send the presentation out. This is the last of several Third Thursday College conversations that we've had, and they've been so successful that we will be returning in the fall. We wish you all a safe and relaxing summer. And now I would like to turn it over to Ulysses from RPI. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you, everybody. And it's a pleasure to be with you this morning. My name is Ulysses De Armas. I'm Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions at Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, which is the oldest technological research university in the United States. And I'm so happy to be with you this morning. So I just want to give you a little bit of history in terms of our BSMD program. It was started in 1964 between Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, Albany Medical College, and Union College as well. And in the beginning, it was actually a 6-year program where the first 2 years the student would spend at Rensselaer, and then the next 4 years at Albany Med. At some point in the early to mid 90s, that changed and we became a 7-year program. And so in terms of a timeline for the program, the first 5 semesters, the student will be following the biology curriculum at Rensselaer. They need to maintain a 3.5 GPA in both their biology courses as well as the courses outside of biology. They'll get 1 semester of a mulligan if they dip below. But after that, if they continue to have a GPA under 3.5 in the program, they'll be asked to leave the program, stay at Rensselaer, but leave the program. Semester 6, which is the second semester of junior year, the student will be going back and forth between Rensselaer and Albany Medical College, start talking to professors, get the lay of the land. They'll start a research project, which they will conclude during the summer prior to going directly to Albany Medical College. And then the first year at Albany Med will count as their 4th year at Rensselaer. So they'll finish their bachelor's degree at the end of their first year of medical school. Some of the outcomes that we're looking for within this program is bridging the gap between the lab and the patient. So being able to go into a lab, do research, and then apply that to specific patient care. They'll conduct critical research that will be helpful in the caring of patients, especially looking at the implementation or looking at drugs and new drugs that can be used for that care. And then obviously accomplishing basic research tasks while they're in that particular program. And then in terms of the application process for our BSMD program, you know, they must apply only through the common application. They can't use the coalition app. They can't use our own application. They can only use the common application. Where it says there, apply to only one, Rensselaer is in a unique position in that there are 3 colleges in the capital region of New York that offer a similar BSMD program. Union College has one, and Siena College is the 3rd. And so when it says to apply to only one, what that means is that in the past, we have had students who have applied to either 2 or all 3 of those programs. And Albany Medical College is not a fan of that at all. All 3 programs are very different. Union College, their BSMD program takes on more of a business model, teaching students about being a chief of staff or things along those lines. And Siena College's model is more of a community service model. Both Union and Siena's programs are both 8 years. Rensselaer's is 7. So ours is the only one of the 3 that is an accelerated program. If the student is or on the application, it'll ask what the intended major is. In the drop-down box, there will be one of the options will say physician scientist, BSMD. That's the one that the student needs to choose. And it automatically puts them in the biology curriculum, which is what they will be studying. They do not have the option of picking biomedical engineering. This is a physician scientist major. It's not an engineering major, so they can't pick BME. They must follow the biology curriculum. The deadline for the application is November 1st. It is not an early decision application. It just means that it's a long process to evaluate and make a final decision. So the application starts at Rensselaer. If the person, if that particular application moves on, then it goes to Albany Med. Albany Med will then read the application. If they like what they see in terms of the candidate, they will contact the candidate to set up an interview, whether in person or virtual. And then the final decision after the interview, the final decision is made by Albany Medical College. And that's usually mid to late March to early April. So from November 1st to possibly April, that's a long span of time. So as I always tell students interested in this program, patience is the key word that you need to have when you're applying to this particular program. And then only US citizens or permanent residents are allowed to be a part of the program. So we're not allowed to have international students or Canadian students as part of the BSMD program. That policy comes from Albany Medical College and not Rensselaer. In terms of what you need for or in your application, test scores are not optional. You must submit either an SAT or ACT, and we can only accept up to November's test date. So anything past November will not be acceptable to the reviewing process. You don't have to take the writing portion of the SAT or ACT. And obviously, high scores are the ones that we're looking for. I would say, anything above a 1400 would be considered really good score, both SAT or ACT wise. ACT, probably, I think that's a 32 or a 33 on the composite. So regardless, those are the scores that generally the students who are admitted into the program will have with them. In terms of the transcript, 4 years of English, science, we want to see 1 year each of biology, chemistry, and physics. And specifically for chemistry and physics, we want to make sure that those are lab-based chemistry and physics programs. So conceptual chemistry or conceptual physics, those are not acceptable courses for this program. 4 years of math, pre-calculus is the minimum. We want to make sure that the student is, or we want to see that the student is taking math in their senior year as well, so that if the student has an option between calculus and statistics, we highly recommend that the student pick calculus over statistics. Statistics is a great course, but it's a very different type of math. And so the sooner the student can get involved in calculus, the easier their first semester at Rensselaer is going to be in terms of mathematics. Whoops, there we go. In terms of their activities resume, students, although it's not required, students who are in this particular program tend to have research as part of their resume. And if not research, then some type of volunteer medical experience where they volunteered at a hospital or a nursing facility. They were able to perhaps shadow a doctor. Those are important items for a student to have as part of their activities resume. But we're looking for, the different things that the student was passionate about, their leadership opportunities that they had within those particular clubs and organizations that they were a part of. In terms of recommendations, student can send up to 3. They should be 3 quality recommendations. If the student has done research, one of those should be from their research mentor. One should be from either a math or a science teacher, and then one should be from their guidance counselor. Okay, so quality over quantity, and 3 is the maximum. All right. In terms of writing samples, we want to see at least 2 writing samples. The common application we want to see, and then the second essay there's a second essay that's program specific, and the question basically is, why do you want to be a doctor, or why do you want to enter into the medical profession? And that's where the research or volunteer medical experience would come into play. The student can then talk about their experiences in those arenas. Generally speaking, we get a little over 500 applications for that program, and we're only allowed to have anywhere between 11 to 15 in the program. So it's an extremely selective program that we have here at Rensselaer. The students are integrated in, the students in this program are integrated in with the rest of their first year cohort. They'll be in the biology courses and math courses and everything else, along with the other with the other first-year students. But those particular students in that program, they do tend to form a very close bond with one another. They do study together and do other activities together. But in terms of academics, they're put in with everybody else. And then if you have any questions, general questions about the program, once our time is over, Lisa in the admissions office is the perfect person to send an email to ask questions about the program. So with that, I'm done, and I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to Robert.
Thank you, Ulysses. I appreciate that. I am going to share my screen, so bear with me for just 1 second. Okay, I assume everybody can see that right now, but I am Bob Adkins. I'm the Dean of Admission here at Washington and Jefferson College. We are a small coeducational private liberal arts and sciences institution located about a half an hour southwest of Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that in just a second. It's interesting. I want to thank Jenny and Sage for allowing us to present to you guys today, and I want to thank you for joining us today. We really appreciate your time and energy. Let me start by talking a little bit about W&J, because I assume that most of you probably don't know much about the institution. So let's start there. Let's see if I can get it to work now. Here we go. Here we go. Okay. So where are we located? We're located at about a half an hour southwest of Pittsburgh. As I mentioned earlier, we have direct access to the city. We are in a small town. The upper right picture there shows the city of Washington itself. We're a town in an area that's about 60,000 people. We are located, as I said, very close to the city of Pittsburgh, which is well known for its health facilities and its health research opportunities. So our students during their time at W&J certainly have the opportunity to take advantage of that to help pad their resume during their undergraduate years. Pittsburgh is also known as the city of bridges. And so, of course, I had to show you some bridges there so you can see some of the unique things we have available for you as a student in Pittsburgh. As a liberal arts institution, we believe very strongly in taking a very personal approach to all of our students, and that's reflected particularly with the types of programs we have available for our students interested in pre-health. Just a little bit about our academics here. We tend to have very small classes. Professors really tend to know who you are, which means that when it comes time for a student to do an internship later on in their career, the internships are not very cookie cutter. They're very much suited to the individual student's needs. So if we know a pre-health student's interested ultimately in going into pediatrics, then we're likely to help them get an internship with the Pittsburgh Children's Hospital, because that's going to be the best place for them to do that. So we're able to, because of our size, work very closely with individual students to make sure that their career at W&J is tailored to set them up to be successful once they make that transition from W&J to medical school or wherever else they may be going at that point. You can see that the vast majority of our faculty members have a terminal degree, so they've gone as far as they can possibly go. I want to point out in particular that 40% of our students participate in travel experience. That's unusual, particularly for students that are interested in pre-health, and we'll talk about how that ties in just 1 second. But we've made sure that our students who are interested in going on to medical school have the same opportunities to travel abroad that the rest of the student body has. So that's an important part of who we are. Obviously, in addition to the pre-med programs at W&J, we've got a number of other programs. And W&J is unique in that we require every student to have at least 2 academic programs during their time on our campus. So every student at W&J will graduate with either a double major, a major and a minor, a major and a double minor, a major and a triple minor, a double major and double minor, whatever combination you can think of, they're able to do that, and they're able to do that in just a couple of 4 years. I had mentioned the other pre-professional programs because we often have students who will be interested in going through the pre-law program at the same time they're going through the pre-med program. And their ultimate interest at some point down the road might potentially be in administration or perhaps in working in malpractice law, but they want to get that pre-med background, or they want to get the pre-law background to serve as a physician. So again, we partner with a number of different schools for a number of different areas, including engineering, and biomedical engineering is one of the more popular programs we offer on campus right now. Campus life is very robust, and our pre-health students participate in all walks of campus life. I am a W&J graduate, class of 1987, so it's been a few years since I was at W&J. But during my time there, I played football, ran track, was involved in the pre-med program, and was in student government and several other clubs and organizations. I am very typical for what our students are like at W&J. And so I want to make sure that you understand that a pre-med student at W&J is going to have the opportunity to be involved in things outside the classroom to allow them to, A, decompress and get rid of that stress that's going to build up as part of the pre-med program, but more importantly, to allow them to show the diversity of their interests. When they apply to medical schools, we don't want them to just be one note. We don't want them to just be looking at students that are only involved in science programs. So our students are involved in all the organizations and clubs that are available on campus throughout the course of their 4 years at W&J. And we think that's an important aspect, an important component of the medical school process when they apply. I mentioned earlier study abroad. This number, 40%, applies across every single major and program at the campus, including students involved in the pre-med program. Many medical schools, however, take a very dim view of science courses taken internationally. Unfortunately, that's the case for many medical schools. And so we've been able to make some programs available to our pre-med students that will not add to their time at W&J while giving them the opportunity to study abroad. I'm going to point out two here very quickly. The first is you see that we have a short term during J-term. J-term is January. We have a 2-week session during that time frame, and students can take a class over that time frame that allows them to be on campus or to travel. And you go with a group of students. So, you know, students can go with some of their classmates. My daughter went to Ireland, as an example, to study theater while she was there. But you can do all those programs as well, because again, you're not taking a full class during that time frame. So it's a perfect opportunity for students to get abroad and to travel and do some things that are a little bit different. I won't mention study abroad locations there, but the next big way for students to get away from W&J and off campus, what we call the Magellan Project. I think this is a great way for students, particularly those that are interested in medical school, to build a unique experience that they can then add to their application, to their CV, when they apply to medical schools, that allows them to stand apart. And I'm going to tell a quick story here so you have an idea of what I'm talking about. We have a young graduate named Nick Tiger. Nick actually just finished his residency right before the pandemic. So he's been out for a few years and is now practicing physician. But Nick came to us, and Nick is from Western Pennsylvania. Nick had really never been any further away from Western Pennsylvania than to go to Ocean City, Maryland for vacation. That's the furthest he'd ever gone from Western Pennsylvania. But Nick had a fascination for tigers. And so Nick designed a Magellan Project as a pre-med student that allowed him to spend the summer after his sophomore year in South Africa and New Zealand in shark tanks, tagging great white sharks during their migration. Now, I don't know about you, but for me, that's a pretty awesome experience. And when Nick applied to medical schools, yeah, his resume looked great. Yeah, his grades were great. Yeah, his MCAT scores were really good. But all the interviews really want to talk about was his experience in a shark cage. What was that like? How did you feel? And obviously, if you can remain calm under that situation, he can probably remain calm in an operating room or under an emergency situation. And that's really what we wanted to do with the Magellan. Allow students to do experiences that are unique just to them. So students self-design these experiences. They can go off anywhere in the world and do all kinds of crazy things. And you can see some of the examples right here. And again, it doesn't have to be involved in pre-health or pre-med, but it can be. And if it is, obviously it's a great resume builder, but it doesn't have to be. In Nick's situation, obviously he's not going to be operating on great white sharks anytime real soon. And hopefully, knock on wood, he's never going to be operating in a shark cage underwater. That would be pretty tragic experience. So, but again, the idea is that students have the opportunity to travel abroad when many pre-med programs, that's not going to be a possibility. So we want to make sure that you are aware of that. Now let's talk about PreHealth programs. That's really why you're here at W&J. We have a couple of accelerated and guaranteed programs at W&J, and these are just a few of the things that I want to mention to you fairly quickly here. The top three are the ones we want to focus on this morning. We have programs with Temple, Jefferson, and with Leecom, and Salus Optometry. I'll mention that one as well. But those have been in place for let me back up. The Temple program has been in place for about 20 years or so. We signed that agreement with them, 21 years ago. And I'll talk a bit more about details here in a second in terms of what it takes. But there are actually two programs with Temple. Temple recently renamed their medical school to the Sidney Kimmel, or to Lewis Katz School of Medicine. And so the Lewis Katz School of Medicine is the actual medical school that is associated with Temple. So when I say Temple, I'm really talking about the Lewis Katz School of Medicine, but that's a mouthful. So I'm just going to use Temple so that you are aware of what we're talking about. But there are two programs there. The first is the Medical Scholars Program. That's a program that's designed for high school students. So as a high school student, as a senior, you can apply to the Temple Medical School using the Medical Scholars Program. The Early Assurance Program is a program designed for current college students. And again, I'll talk about the differences between those two in just a second. The Jefferson Allopathic Agreement, that's an agreement with Jefferson School of Medicine in Philadelphia, Sidney Kimmel Jefferson School of Medicine in Philadelphia. And that's a little different. And I'll talk about that one again in just a second. And Leecom is a more traditional program. And we have early agreement programs with them with 3 areas: osteopathic medicine, dental school, and then with pharmacy. And then, of course, we have a 3-4 program with optometry. And we've got some articulation agreements with some other, with Chatham that I'll talk about, mention briefly at the end. Let's talk about the Medical Scholars Program with Temple. That's a unique program. You can see the description here. Essentially, students apply over the course of their senior year. And they have to be invited to apply. They can apply to W&J using the common application, using our application. We don't really care how they apply. However, they do need to have a transcript, and the deadline to apply to W&J in order to be considered for the Medical Scholars Program with Temple is going to be right around December 1st. Students have to have their application into W&J prior to December 1st. We also need to have, prior to December 1st, a transcript and SAT scores. Ulysses mentioned earlier that SAT scores were still required for his program. Almost all of our programs like this, the Medical Scholars Program, still requires SAT or ACT scores as well. The minimum SAT score required to be considered for this program is a 1350. The minimum ACT score required is a 31. Those are composite scores. In addition, students have to achieve or earned a 3.75 GPA or higher. And if their school ranks, they need to be in the top 5% of their graduating class. So just to review very quickly for this, 1350 or 31 on the SAT or ACT, top 5% of graduating class, and a 3.75 overall GPA. Should they meet those requirements, W&J will then send them an application to apply for this particular program. Last year, this past year, the one that we're wrapping up right now, we sent out just a shade over 150 applications, and about 100 students actually ended up submitting their applications to W&J as part of this program. The way that it works is our pre-health committee at W&J will review all submitted applications. They'll then winnow that down to a group of about 50 or so students that they will then conduct interviews with. In the past, they've all been in person. Over the last 2 years, obviously, over the last 3 years, basically at this point, they've all been done virtually. So again, we'll interview those students. We will then select a subset of those students that we'll then send on to Temple. They'll have a second interview with members of the admissions committee at Temple, and Temple will then make a decision. As part of the Medical Scholars Program and the Early Assurance Program, which I'll talk about again in just a second, W&J is guaranteed to have a minimum of 8 total slots for these programs. We've been very fortunate the last few years, just as part of the Medical Scholars Program, Temple has exceeded those slots. So this past year, they chose 14 students to admit to this particular program. Last year, they chose 12, and the year before that, they chose 10. So you can sort of see where this is going. Our students have typically done very well at Temple, and they're reflecting that by allowing more students into the program. Now, the Early Assurance Program at Temple is something that's designed for current W&J students. So as a junior at W&J, you could apply to Temple using the Early Assurance Program. That runs very similar in that you apply to that particular program. Temple will then select you and interview you and decide whether or not they want to admit you. And in order to be eligible for this particular program, students at the end of their sophomore year need to have a 3.6 GPA or higher and have completed all the required courses, which I'll cover in just one second. So again, a 3.6 at the end of their sophomore year in order to apply. In order to be admitted to this program, students have to conclude their junior year with a GPA no lower than a 3.6 overall, with no individual grade within the sciences lower than a B-. So again, those are the parameters to be admitted to this particular program as an underclass student, as a junior at W&J. I can tell you again that despite the fact that we've admitted way more students over the last couple of years, and Temple has admitted way more students over the last couple of years, we have been able to send anywhere from 4 to 8 students on to Temple via this program each year. So we're excited about the partnership that we have with them, and we're excited about the opportunities the students have to be able to finish their degree at Temple after starting here at W&J. The next program we have is really kind of unique in its area. And we were the first school that Jefferson Medical School approached in regards to this program. It started about 3 or 4 years ago. Essentially, as you can read here, it's for students who decide that they want medical school later in life, later in their career, or they are not necessarily a super strong science student, but no, they want to go to medical school. Okay, because in order to qualify for this particular program, you have to be a non-science major. So if you are a biology or chemistry or physics major, psychology, this program is not for you. However, if you're English, sociology, political science, business administration, and know that you want to go to medical school, there is a route available for you here. And this route is the route that you can take. So you still have to be pretty strong in the sciences. I mean, in order to qualify for this particular program, you would apply typically over the course of your junior year. The overall GPA for students required in this, the overall GPA at the end of your sophomore year has to be a 3.4 or higher. And you have to conclude the end of your junior year with a 3.4 or higher. Again, in terms of science courses, no grade can be lower than a B- within this particular program. But again, it's for students that have an area, you really want to major in political science because you have a passion for that, but you want to help people and you want to be a physician. This is your route. You can do that. There's an opportunity for you to do that. The big thing here for students that are going through this program is the first bullet point there. MCATs are not required. And I can't stress that one enough because as those of you that work with students that are interested in PreHealth know, MCATs are not a lot of fun. I took them myself. I remember walking out and thinking, I don't know anything about medicine at all after that. And clearly that was not the case, but that's what you feel like. And so for students that are going through this program, we fully recognize that they're not going to have the preparation, and Jefferson recognizes that they're not going to have the normal preparation that a student would have for the MCATs. So they've just waived that requirement altogether. So again, it's just a great opportunity for students that are non-science majors. And then Leecom is the last of our early assurance programs with medical schools. You might have noticed that this one's with an osteopathic school. Lake Erie College of Medicine is osteopathic. The first two are allopathic medical schools. And I'll talk a little about the differences there in just a second. But again, this is for students who know they want pre-health. Students will apply to this program over the course of their senior year. There are, again, 2 opportunities here. You can apply as a junior at W&J. You can also apply over the course of your senior year. This one works a little differently. And this one, as a senior, the application actually resides on Leecom's website. So you would actually go to Leecom's website, you would complete the application there. They would then notify the schools that you're interested in. So they would notify W&J. Leecom has a number of partner schools. We're just one of them. They would notify us that you've applied, that you're going through that particular process. They'll also notify us of whether or not you've been accepted to that particular process. It's completely independent of W&J. Completely independent of this institution. So we just house the students here over the course of their first 4 years, and then of course they will move on. Highlight to this particular program, A, it's osteopathic. B, they have 2 campuses that they can choose from. Lake Erie College of Medicine has a campus obviously up in Erie. They also have a medical school in Bradenton, Florida. And so students can choose which campus they want to go to when they're at that point over the course of their senior year, typically. That's when they have to make that decision. Again, this is a little bit different. Minimum GPA required at W&J to be admitted to this program during your time on the campus is a 3.4 with no grade lower than a C. So it's a little bit different in terms of the parameters. But again, it's an opportunity for students during their time on our campus to guarantee themselves a spot. You can do it as either a senior in high school again or as a junior in college. This is a program that's become very popular with our students over the last couple of years. Obviously, a lot of students want to go to medical school in Florida. I totally get that. I totally understand. And this allows them to do that, particularly for those folks that are like Ulysses and I from the northern states that really want to get someplace a little bit warmer for their postgraduate. I totally get it. You have the opportunity. You can do that through this particular program. I am going to mention just a second here. We have another program with them that students can also apply to during their senior year, or during their junior year at W&J, if you want to go to pharmacy school. So again, and this for students that develop an interest in pharmacy later in their career. Maybe they start at W&J, they think they want pre-med, and they wind up not necessarily wanting to work directly with people in that aspect. We have an opportunity for them to utilize this program to transition from medical school to a school of pharmacy if they're interested in doing that. Now, I'll just mention very briefly our agreements with Chatham, physical therapy, occupational therapy, and then physician's assistance programs. So again, those are things that are done at W&J. You apply to those over the course of your junior year on our campus and are guaranteed spots in those places as a senior. So how do we get you to these points? That's really the next question. So at a liberal arts college, you're not going to be left on your own. You'll have an advisor from the PreHealth committee. That individual will work individually with you as a student to make sure that you have everything you need. What you're seeing in front of you right now on the screen in front of you is the first page of the checklist for all of our students who are interested in the PreHealth program. So every pre-med student at W&J, every student interested in dentistry, every student interested in physical therapy, if you're interested in anything in PreHealth, you're gonna be handed one of these books your first day on campus, within your first couple of days of campus. And that book will contain everything you need to successfully navigate the PreHealth program here at W&J, including this type of checklist. So literally what we've done is broken down every action that a student needs to take over the course of their 4 years at W&J, when they need to do it, who they need to do it in conjunction with, and when it needs to happen. And so literally as a student, when I was here at W&J, I tore this page out and just put it on my poster board, and as things came up, I checked them off. Students nowadays literally take a picture of this, they translate it into something on their phone, and then the reminders pop up on their phone. My daughter did this as well. Reminders literally just pop up on their phone a couple of weeks before they need to get these things done. And so this happens every single year. Our PreHealth committee goes out every single year and interviews at medical schools, at dental schools, at podiatry schools, at optometry schools to find out what they want us to do to prepare our students, to better prepare our students for success at their level. And what we've done is boil that down into this sort of a checklist that students can then follow to make sure that they're doing everything on time. This is a sort of leftover slide. Just to mention, we use the Common App and the Leadership App at W&J. That's an app that's unique to W&J. And then just a couple testimonials. Both of these students ended up going on to programs in PreHealth. Kiera took advantage of the Temple Medical Scholars Program and is finishing up this year and will be going off to medical school at Temple in just in a couple of months, actually 2 months she'll start. She's very excited about that. And Alessandro will be, he's in his residency, starting his residency this year. So we're excited about that. So with that, I think, pretty much done. Yeah, I want to say thank you. And again, I know I've covered a lot in the last few minutes, but I am here to answer any questions you may have about the PreHealth programs here at W&J or any place else. So thank you. And I'll hand it off back to Jenny.
Let me unmute myself. Let me just kind of go through some of the questions that we have here. Thanks, guys. That was awesome. So much information. And I'm glad you gave us some good resources. I'm also glad that we're going to have this on the website, because as for me, I'm going to be looking at this one more time. Let me just kind of go through these. So can you guys speak to what the admit rate is, please?
At Rensselaer, ours is below 10% in terms of admit rate to the BSMD program.
And that's like how many students usually apply a year? I guess that would, in relationship to that.
We typically will get a little over 500 applications for the BSMD program, and Albany Medical College will do the admitting. They'll do the final number.
Awesome.
So we're a little different. Pretty much every student that applies to the Temple Medical Scholars Program or to Leecom has been admitted or will be admitted. But getting accepted to those programs is a little different. So we're running right now around a 15% acceptance rate into Temple, and right now about a 25% acceptance rate into the Leecom program.
Another good question is, what are you looking for in students' portfolios for, oops, wrong one. I was asking an art major question. Let me ask you this. For students that are applying, what kind of things do you look for their portfolio? Do you look for a student that has been working, perhaps working in their local doctor's office, done some kind of internship, done some extra classes in that area? What kind of things would stand out under their activities?
Go ahead, Ulysses.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
For us, really, research is important. If you can do research, that's fantastic, and it's even better if it's been published. That would be, a great coup for you as an individual student. At the very least, and I mean at the very least, would be students. Sorry, my phone is ringing. I apologize. would be students doing internships and shadowing experiences. But I can tell you, if you just do one of those, you're probably not going to be super competitive for either one of those two programs. What we've seen in the last couple of years is the real ramping up of student experiences in high school that deal directly with medical experience. So they're either interning with an individual physician or with a hospital. They're doing research with universities, with organizations, with individuals. The more things like that you can do, the better off you're going to be in terms of applying and being admitted to these types of programs.
Yeah, similarly, although research isn't required, it certainly puts you in a much more competitive state if you have it. If you don't have research, then at the minimum, some type of shadowing or volunteer experience. If for no other reason, the student needs to, their second essay is about why they want to be a doctor. If you have nothing to draw from, then that's going to be a very difficult essay to write as part of the process.
That's excellent. Do the students that are applying to the BSMD program, do they have an interview also with your individual colleges?
No, it's just with Albany Med. Okay. You know, and then they will make the final decision after, one way or the other, after the interview. So we don't have an interview process for the BSMD program.
And for us,
go ahead, Bob. I'm sorry.
For us, it depends on the program. So with the Temple program, there is a required interview with a member of our pre-health committee. With Leecom, there's not.
Okay. A question from Sigas here. Does either RPI or W&J provide in-house MCAT Prep classes, or are students on their own to access these?
Go ahead, Bob.
So we do provide an MCAT Prep course over the course of the student's junior year. So yeah, absolutely, it's something that students can take advantage of at no cost to them.
For our BSMD program, once they're done with their third year and they're doing their research, and once they're done with their research summer, they automatically transition over to Albany Medical College and they bypass the MCAT. So there is no MCAT requirement for our program.
Excellent. Another great question is, what kind of SAT/ACT scores are you looking at? And will you also be evaluating things like AP scores, since there's no more subject tests?
Go ahead.
So SAT scores, clearly the higher the score, the better. Typically, our applicants for BSMD average above a 1400 SAT, or 32 and above, 33 and above on ACT composite score.
Totally agree. Since the minimum required for the Lewis Katz or Temple School program is a 1350, you can just sort of do the math. Yeah, you're looking at mid to high 1400s as an average, and with ACTs probably 33, 34, something like that. It's competitive, and it's something these are the best and brightest students in the country applying to get into the most competitive programs in the country. So yeah, it's. Yeah.
I think there's one thing, and this is from me, that we've touched on, but maybe you guys could expand it a little bit. So let's talk, start with you, Lucy. So you have 3 schools feeding into this program at Albany. Are there other colleges that also feed into them? And like, how competitive does it become at that point? Like, if they're taking 8 from you, mm-hmm. like, what's the total picture look like, so that we can share that with our students?
Yeah, Albany Medical College definitely, they're taking applications from universities from all over the country. I don't know the number, right. But I know, and that's why, at least for our program, they don't want to see duplicate applications from other schools, because the programs are different. As I mentioned, Union has a business model, Sienna's is a community service model, and ours is research. If you send an application for all 3, or to all 3 universities, what you're telling Albany Med is, I don't know what I want. And for a program as highly specialized as this, they want students who know what they want to do, not necessarily, pediatrics or gerontology, not that, but they know they want to attack medical school from a specific angle. And if you send applications from all three schools, you're telling them, I don't know what I want to do.
Yeah, sure. And I think, and Bob, before you get to that, I think sometimes there's a mixed message with that, because if a student is applying to a service academy, we tell them to apply to all.
Yeah.
So, I mean, not that would necessarily be the same student, but it might be, because it might be the high-end one. So that's really good distinguish. Bob?
So we work with, two major schools in terms of Temple and Leecom. Both are fairly large medical schools, and we'll receive applications from a number of different places. They approach it very differently. Temple has a very limited number of partner schools with programs like ours. I mean, I think it's less than 10 at this point. So they have, as part of their first year medical school class, they built in a number of slots for all those schools that are partnering with them. Leecom approaches it a little differently. Leecom has a large number of schools that they partner with, or a large number of colleges that they partnered with, and they don't set a limit. And so literally, if they believe that there are 25 students coming to W&J that they want as part of their freshman class, their first year medical school, they'll take all 25. If they believe there are only 3, they'll take 3. So what we've seen is that the acceptance rate there has varied widely depending upon what they want their class to look like. I can tell you pre-pandemic, they were shrinking a little bit. They felt like they had a large number of applications from a large number of places, and they didn't need to have a lot of their partner schools bring in students. Post-pandemic and during the pandemic, they've loosened up the floodgates a little bit. And so, I can't predict what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years. But I imagine that, once that, to pardon my analogy, once that fat rat gets into the snake, they're not going to want to lose any weight. So I'd imagine that they're not going to be pulling back their acceptances anytime real soon.
Right. Just as a sidebar, it'd be interesting to see what the retention rate is too once they go through you into med school, since they're younger. Do you know what I mean? And if this is really the path that they wanted to go.
That's a great question. I have a number for you. Absolutely. So what we found, I'm a numbers guy. What can I say? What we found is that for all of our students that go into medical school, no matter which program they choose, and just so that you're aware, about 90%, 95% of our students that go to medical school do so within the first 2 years of graduating from W&J. They're not waiting 3 or 4 or 5 years. They're going right away. Typically speaking, 90% of them will finish in 3 years. They're or 4 years. They're done on time. Yeah. They're not dropping out. They're not taking time away. They're finishing on time. So
wow, those are really good stats.
Yeah.
Do you have those too, Ulysses, for RPA?
No, not for our BSMD program. They're really young.
They are young.
Going to Albany Medical College. They're only doing 3 years.
Right.
At Rensselaer, so they're 20, 21 years old. Right. And I don't have the retention rate, but I over the years, in speaking to our School of Science, our students tend to finish, in the 4 years that they're at Albany Med.
Excellent. I have a question here. If a student applies, to this program, but is not accepted, are they still considered for W&J or RPI?
Yes, so the application starts with us. If we feel the student has a strong enough application, we'll send it on. If we feel the student is not strong enough, we will consider them for our general program at Rensselaer, because these are usually really top students. And so we will admit them. More oftentimes than not, they're admitted to Rensselaer. And what we will tell them is that they can now pick any major within the School of Science.
Got it.
So that if they want to do neuroscience or computational biology or biochemistry, biophysics, and try and enter medical school the more traditional way, they can do that. Biomedical engineering is not an option, because it's engineering, it's not science.
Got it.
If the application moves on to Albany Med, and they get an interview, and Albany Med says no. Albany Med will then send us those applications or those names, and they'll go through the same process. We'll admit them to Rensselaer's general program, and they can pick any program within the School of Science and then follow the traditional route to medical school.
Got it. Thank you. How about you, Bob?
Yeah, not much to add to that, except that as a liberal arts school, we don't really care what they major in, no matter what program they go through. So, if they want to be they want to be a Temple Medical Scholar and be a major in philosophy, you feel free to go ahead and do that. But more importantly, because they've already been admitted to W&J before they go through before we even send them an application, they're admitted to W&J. And so obviously we want them to be here on our campus. We'd love to have them here on campus. We think that they're great students, regardless of whether they get into the Temple program or not.
While I have you there, just to clarify, is Temple a 7 or 8 year program?
8-year program.
8-year program, okay. And then the next question is, and this is interesting, can a student apply ED elsewhere while also applying to these combined programs?
So early decision? I mean, so
that's an interesting question.
That is an interesting question. And from our end, obviously, we're not going to know if a student applies early decision to another institution until he or she withdraws his application because they applied early decision and were admitted. So the practical answer is, of course, they can do that if they want to do that. The reality is that they may not know if they've been admitted to our program before the ED deadline to deposit at the other school, though. So that's something
it most likely wouldn't be.
Yeah.
So they probably would have to decide between the two. How about, what are your thoughts, Ulysses?
Yeah, similarly, we're not going to know if a student applies ED and then somewhere else and then applies to our program as well. In terms of, because they would have to withdraw their application if they're admitted. So I don't, that's a good question. I don't know if we've ever had that situation. I'm sure we have, and we just didn't know about it.
I guess, that comes from us being more knowledgeable. If I had a student ask me that at this point, I would say, well, you're not going to find out for 5 months. So right. Do you really want to apply to this? Or, kind of really make them walk through that instead of just, that's number 20 on my list of applications.
In a sense, in a rather, I guess, crude sense, you're really wasting time of somebody who's reading the application by applying to a BSMD program and ED somewhere else. So that if I've taken, I don't read those applications, but if I've taken the time to read the application and then I hear that you've withdrawn because you applied ED somewhere else, I'm going to be a little bit upset.
Totally agree.
Exactly. Any more questions out there with our audience? These have been really good today. Mm-hmm. Well, guys, any closing thoughts you'd like to leave us with?
I'll just say that, obviously, as I mentioned earlier, these are the best and brightest students possible. I mean, they're out there doing great things, doing wonderful things. And I think all of us as institutions would love to have them on our campus. To echo what Ulysses said, choose your programs carefully, because clearly they're all going to have a different foci and different opportunities available to them. And just because it sounds good on paper may not be what you need or what you want. So choose your program wisely, choose your program carefully, listen to your counselors, and of course, let us know what we can do to help you with any questions. I also dropped my contact information in the chat line.
Thank you.
I'm the contact person about this program at W&J. So if you have questions, contact me.
It's perfect. How about you, Ulysses? Any final thoughts?
Yeah, I would say, BSMD programs are great, but there are so many universities out there, including RPI, that have traditional routes to medical school. And so that accelerated programs are, at least ours, it's not for everyone. And that student needs to be very careful. This is a family decision. It's not just a student decision or just a parental decision. You need to think about this very, very carefully, because a 7-year program, that is really tough.
Yes.
And I've spoken to alums who did the original 6-year program at Rensselaer back in, before it was changed in the 90s. Right. And they said, all we did was this program. We had no room for anything else. And their opinion was even a 7-year program is too accelerated, that it should be 4 and 4. But they said they understand that the 7-year program, that the attraction to a 7-year accelerated. So there are many paths to medical school. This is just one of them, but it's a big decision to make.
Absolutely. You know, you guys are just amazing. Thank you so much. And thank you to the audience. Your questions have been great. They've been inspiring. I hope that you're leaving here a little bit wiser than when you first logged on. And if you have any other ones that you'd like us to see us do in the fall, just fire me an email, or you can put it in the chat or whatever. Guys, thank you so much. Counselors, have a restful summer. You've had a really long year. Thank you, guys.
Take care. Thank you.